This is Rio Taswell with People for the American Way, and this is the Right Wing Roundup. First up, we have a clip of Pizzagate conspiracy theorist and QAnon promoter Liz Crokin speaking about her experience attending a fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago recently, where she felt a very warm welcome among like-minded individuals, reflecting on how far her movement has come in just the past few years, from the fringes of the internet to the personal residence of a former president of the United States. Check it out for yourself.
I got the privilege and the honor to speak at Mar-a-Lago about Pizzagate at the fundraiser, at the cocktail reception that we had outside by the pool before we went to the ballroom for dinner. And, 6 years ago, you know, I was a lone soldier fighting this. No one wanted to even say the word Pizzagate because the media had so successfully redefined what it is, and it was so taboo. And I can't even tell you how badly I was ostracized for talking about Pizzagate, exposing Pizzagate, and how many friends I lost, and what a lonely journey it was. So to go from that to being at Mar-a-Lago and being able to freely talk about Pizzagate there and say this is real and there's no more tiptoeing around it anymore was just an incredible experience.
Here with me to discuss is my colleague, Peter Montgomery, who is a senior fellow with Right Wing Watch, a project of People for the American Way that's been tracking members of the radical right for more than 2 decades. Peter, what do you make of this clip of Liz Crokin basking in the glory of being welcomed into the home of the man who is currently the standard bearer of the Republican Party?
It's pretty stunning to have a QAnon activist and promoter of wild conspiracy theories welcomed into an event with the former president and a presidential wannabe. But it's less surprising when you look at Trump's behavior. He has always played footsie with the QAnon movement, but this fall he really started aggressively promoting QAnon through his Truth Social, even posting pictures of himself wearing Q-pin, using music associated with the movement at his rallies. So he's really embracing that and other extremist wings of the party. To put it in context, he also, not long ago had anti-Semitic white nationalists having dinner with him at Mar-a-Lago too. So it's in that context of Trump really embracing and holding up the extreme wing of his party.
You're absolutely right in that it's no surprise that Trump has not disavowed QAnon conspiracy theories and even, like you said, played footsie with them really since the start of his political career and his run for president. But if you could just kind of walk us through the timeline a little bit, starting with Pizzagate, which I believe went viral in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. How and when did this expand into the broader QAnon phenomenon? And how long was it until these stories, which you all have been tracking from the very beginning of Right Wing Watch, started getting picked up and covered by the mainstream media?
Yeah, the Pizzagate conspiracy theory really emerged during the 2016 presidential election. And of course, that was aimed at Hillary Clinton and at the Democratic Party, promoting this idea that Hillary Clinton and other high-ranking Democrats were supposedly involved in this satanic child abuse ring. And then after Trump was elected in the fall of 2017, QAnon emerged basically out of Pizzagate and expanded it to this idea that there is a global ring of satanic pedophiles, trafficking children, killing children, using their blood to make their own life-enhancing drugs. I mean, it's a wild set of conspiracies, but it has spread through social media, through right-wing figures like Trump, either tacitly embracing it or explicitly embracing it. And a poll earlier this year suggested that somewhere between 15 and 20% of Americans and a quarter of all Republicans embrace the core of the QAnon conspiracy theory. And it's proven deadly. It has led people to violence, just as other conspiracy theories lead to violence.
Absolutely. Those are pretty terrifying statistics to hear. Let's talk about, for a minute, the electoral impacts of these dangerous right-wing conspiracy theories. Now, thankfully, many of Trump's handpicked candidates this cycle failed to win office, but the fact that some of them were even successful in becoming the GOP nominee in and of itself is extremely concerning. Now, I know that Right Wing Watch kept close tabs on a number of these figures long before they entered politics, but if you could just talk to me a little bit about Doug Mastriano, who became the GOP candidate for governor in Pennsylvania before losing to Democrat Josh Shapiro.
Yeah, Doug Mastriano is a state senator in Pennsylvania who Right Wing Watch started covering even before he tossed his hat into the ring for the governorship. And he was a leader of the Stop the Steal efforts in Pennsylvania. Even before he decided to run, he was going on radio programs hosted by QAnon activists, talking about the fact that he was waiting for instructions from God on whether or not to run for office. And during his campaign, he campaigned at QAnon conferences with other extremists on the right. And I grew up in Pennsylvania, and it was really extremely troubling to me that someone like Mastriano had actually gotten the Republican Party's nomination. And fortunately, he was convincingly rejected by voters. But it is a sign of how deep the extremism runs within the Republican Party.
Truly an insane spectacle to watch happen. Did Doug Mastriano win over the MAGA base from the very beginning, or how did he come to win this nomination given his truly radical beliefs and background?
He mobilized the Trump base. He was the leader of the Stop the Steal movement. In Pennsylvania, or a leader of the Stop the Steal movement in Pennsylvania. He was allied with Trump's lawyers. And so there were multiple candidates in the Republican primary, and he was able to mobilize the base. And I think one of the reasons that he was defeated in the general election was that he was not able to really break beyond that very much. And there were enough Republicans who were troubled by who he was and how he was campaigning, that he wasn't able to pull it off. Thank goodness.
Thank goodness, indeed. So how would you say Mastriano is similar to some of the other extremist candidates that ended up on the ballot this cycle, like Kari Lake in Arizona or Christina Caramo in Michigan?
I think one thing they had in common was a faith that they could win purely on the basis of their closeness with Trump and with mobilizing the MAGA base. And they thought that it's like they believed their own BS about representing the public at large. And they didn't think they had to reach out to moderate voters, to independent voters, to Democrats. In Arizona, Kari Lake, just weeks before the election, was saying she didn't even want John McCain supporters' votes. That's in Arizona. That just is not a smart move. And in Pennsylvania, Mastriano basically refused to talk to any mainstream media. He wouldn't talk to the Philadelphia Inquirer. He wouldn't talk to legitimate newspapers who were trying to cover his campaign. He only talked to right-wing and far-right outlets and campaigned at right-wing events. And he really thought that was going to be enough to carry him over the line just by mobilizing the hard right.
Yeah, it's almost as if they're creating and cultivating and living in their own little reality. Thankfully, their reality ran into actual reality at the ballot box for a lot of them this election. And unfortunately, while many of these new candidates running on the big lie and conspiracy theories did fail to win office this cycle, many incumbent Republican members with extremist beliefs who had already won office did get reelected. And one in particular, Marjorie Taylor Greene, has made a lot of headlines, again, recently, as you know, for claiming that if she and Steve Bannon had planned January 6th, it would have been successful and it would have been armed. Take a quick listen to this clip, recently captured at a GOP fundraiser, where she made these truly incendiary and reckless remarks.
Then January 6th happens, and next thing you know, I organized the whole thing along with Steve Bannon here. And I want to tell you something, if Steve Bannon and I had organized that, we would have won. Not to mention, it would have been armed.
Peter, how are people like Marjorie Taylor Greene able to get away with making such outrageous statements like that without being held accountable or denounced by more moderate members of their own party?
I think it's because many of the more moderate members of the party are still afraid of Trump's base. They're still afraid of MAGA activists within the Republican Party because there are a lot of them, and they are afraid of getting primaried from the right. They don't want to spend their days being attacked by Trump and his supporters, and that's why we see they were really unforgivably cautious and reluctant to denounce Trump for having dinner with white nationalist Nick Fuentes. Marjorie Taylor Greene earlier this year appeared at Fuentes's white nationalist America First Political Action Conference gathering. And after the most recent blow up, she denounced Fuentes, but not very convincingly, because she had been an enthusiastic keynote speaker at his conference earlier this year. And I think it's a sign both of the ongoing influence that the far right has within the Republican Party and the lack of courage from way too many Republican leaders who are not willing to take them on and to take Trump on.
Yeah, well said. A lack of courage indeed. So we would be remiss if we didn't mention that this week there is both the final hearing of the January 6th committee and the release of their final report, which will include referrals for prosecution to the Department of Justice, one of which could be Donald Trump himself. What are your thoughts on the committee findings so far, and what might we expect from their final report?
I think the committee has done an amazing public service by refusing to let this coup and this criminal conspiracy be swept aside or be swept under the carpet. They have ferreted out evidence that Americans would not have otherwise. They have held a whole series of public hearings to get that evidence before us. I think that's a tremendously important public service because they did document that January 6th was not just something that happened that day. It was a criminal conspiracy in the weeks before the election that involved, Trump attorneys, Trump campaign people, people from the right-wing movement and the religious right movement, all trying to figure out how they could keep Trump in power despite the fact that the voters rejected him. And the committee's done a great job at getting that historical record clear. And it's a good thing they have, because the Republicans are about to take control of the House, and they've made it clear that they're going to shut down that investigation. They don't want the truth out. They don't want anyone to be held accountable. And so I think having the final report come out, having it include criminal referrals, will be an important step on having the truth-telling, which is important in itself, lead to some kind of accountability for some of the people who broke the law and some of the people who tried to interfere with the investigation.
Indeed. So you mentioned this, but with the Republicans set to take control of the House in January, what do you think it means for us to be able to hold these perpetrators of January 6th accountable outside of the ongoing work that the FBI and other law enforcement agencies are doing? What can folks do to really make sure that the Republicans in the House aren't able to kind of sweep under the rug these findings and the public perception that there was a major breach of our democracy on January 6th, so that we can prevent anything like that from happening again in the future?
I think the committee report itself is going to provide a great tool for accountability. It'll be possible for individual citizens and activists to use that to hold their own elected officials accountable, to ask them why they are trying to cover this up, if they are, or to ask, to urge them to make sure to continue to try to hold people accountable who tried to interfere with the investigation, and to support criminal investigation by the Justice Department. So I think the committee is going to really give us some tools to do that, even though we know that the House leadership will have no interest in pursuing that accountability.
Thanks so much for watching. This has been the Right Wing Roundup with People for the American Way. Be sure to follow us on all of our channels, which are linked in the description. And if you like what you see, you can check out and support our work at pfaw.org or rightwingwatch.org. See you next time.
Our blue wall stopped the red wave and election deniers got denied election. That's why we're celebrating with the new Democracy Prevails team. We've got lots of work to do, but we should all be proud that when democracy was tested, democracy prevailed. You've earned this. Don't wait. Get yours right now at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.